Hello, my name is Buddy Childress, and I'm Executive Director of Needles Eye Ministries. We are really happy to have you with us today for a monthly speaker series. We hope you enjoy it.
Steve Rogers is President and Chief Administrative Officer of Dominion Resource Services and has been for several years. Many of you know him. He's very active in the community, and one of the things that he is active in, for which we are exceedingly thankful, is that he is one of our board members. And prior to that was on our advisory board and is a small group leader, among other things. What you probably don't know about Steve is that not only is he an accomplished executive with a lot of skills in that area, but he is absolutely hilarious, and you're going to see some of that, and some of what you see, he probably won't realize it when he's doing it. That's just a part of his personality, which makes him so hearable. You will laugh during this message. You will also, at times, I think, be stunned. And you will be stunned in the sense that you will then see the power of a loving God who can change and redirect a life, which is why we ask him to come. He and his wife, Kathy, live near here. They have she's here. Kathy, where are you? I know you're here. There she is. Welcome again. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for having Steve here. And they have 3 children and live nearby. He is a native of Massachusetts, very forlorn about the Super Bowl, but I hope he doesn't get into that. I don't want to hear any more about that. So, would you help me welcome our speaker today, Steve Rogers. Where's your water? You want some water?
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you guys hear me in the back okay? Okay. First, I just want to say thanks to everybody for coming. And I want to thank most of the ministry team from our church, Christ Church Episcopal, for being here today, and my wife, Kathy. 2 of our children were going to be here today, but they're both doing schoolwork, which I think is an excellent reason. And the third one's at UVA, and I'm sure that she's just grinding away and working hard, and that's why she's not here. But people that don't know, yesterday Lisa Ratner, who's in the back, gave one of these talks at Willow Oaks Country Club. And I'm not making this up. This is just a partial list of the things she mentioned in her talk. Sex, drugs, alcohol, child services, serving people after September 11th, online dating, and most importantly, raising llamas. All right? So I left that thing and decided I needed to construct some kind of like seeing God during the Gulf War or something to have something that would impress you folks, but I decided I can't do that. Buddy asked me to do this. I think some people know it's the second time I've done this, and I'm always uncomfortable talking about this because I really don't feel like I have anything to tell anybody. I started my career as an accountant. There's really not much I can do for you there. As Buddy said, I'm an administrative executive, and it means a lot of things, but when you boil it down, if the IT network is up and the toilet paper is stocked, people are happy with what I'm doing. Right? It's just that simple. I've never been hungry. I've never been in a financial situation where I've had trouble making a rent payment or a mortgage payment. My strategy on your average Friday night is to try to get to bed as early as possible without Kathy thinking I'm the most boring human being who's ever walked the earth. And I live in Short Pump, which is kind of like a womb, really. So there's not a lot of that. I don't have a lot of drama to talk to you about today. But when I put this thing together, I went back and looked at the things that have happened. And we all know people, they tell you about their experience. They got knocked off a donkey. There was a light in the room. They rode to work with Jesus in the passenger seat for 3 weeks. Voices call out in the night. Most of what I've been through is much more sedate than that. But when I look back, I can see a pattern, and I can see how God worked in my life, and that's kind of what I want to talk about with you today. I got to give you some background first, some chronology. As Buddy said, I was born and raised in Massachusetts. I was raised in the Roman Catholic Church. I had an incredibly stable upbringing. The best way to describe my parents is to say that having the 2 parents I did was winning the genetic lottery. I mean, they were just phenomenal people. My mother is, and my father has passed on. everything was very secure growing up. I went to Holy Cross College, small Catholic college in Massachusetts. I got a job with Deloitte, this massive accounting firm coming out of college. 1988, Kathy and I moved here. We were married in 1985. And as I talk today, I want you to understand Kathy is just blended into everything that I talk about here. We've been on this journey together, and she is the best friend I've ever had. And I like to say that. And I can say this because she's here. She's a babe, too. But I like to do that to her because it really ticks her off when I do that. See, now she's all red. This is great. I'm done. Thank you. Have a good day. No. And we have 3 children, Erin, who's 22, Andy, who's 20, Lee, who's 15. And there's some things you need to know about my personality. I'm very high-strung. My closest male friend, Tom Wolfarth, refers to me as a nerve sticking out of a torso. I'm a big goal setter. I set goals for everything. My marriage, my career, my faith, my kids. Anybody who has kids knows that's about the dumbest thing you can ever do. I set goals like, what do I want to get done on the weekend? What do I want to do financially? Everything. And I love lists. I make lists like crazy. And I'll actually read from a few lists as we go through this. So as I went through all this chronology and everything, I did everything you're supposed to do. I got all the sacraments. I mean, I went to Mass every week at college. I even read the Bible cover to cover during this whole time frame. But I didn't feel like I was getting any traction. Like I didn't feel like anything was really changing in my view towards God or Jesus or life in the faith front. And I would always often sit there and wonder, is this really this guy with a gray beard in the sky that's directing everything we do? And nothing was happening. But then some things started to change. Early in 1995, I was working at a very small company. And I'd only been there about 7 months. And I got a phone call about a role that was open at Dominion Resources. And because I had been at this company for such a short period of time, I said, I don't think I can be interested, and just said thank you and hung up the phone. But I thought about it, and that night Kathy and I talked about it, and we decided this was just too much of an opportunity not to try to pursue. So I called back the next day and went through the interview process and took all these tests and things like that. And things were looking really, really good that I was going to get this job. And then complete radio silence for like 2 or 3 months. Absolutely nothing. And I was getting a little nervous, not because I absolutely had to have this job, but because I wanted to get the uncertainty off my plate. So one day in early of January 1996, I closed the door to my office, and I did something that at this point in my life was very, very rare. I just said a prayer. And I said, God, could you just let me know what you want me to do and where you want me to go with this particular situation? And I swear this is true. I got up, I opened the door, and the phone rang, and it was Dominion offering me the job. Now, for a lot of people, that should be it, right? Quit your job, build an orphanage, you go. You give everything over at that point. With me, I noted it, put it in the back of my head, and just kept moving along. I'm not the brightest guy with things like this sometimes. So then, early in my time at Dominion, I got invited to one of these lunches. And I can't remember who the speaker was. I remember it was in some room with a bunch of picnic tables, and that's all I remember. But I filled out one of the cards on the table, and I asked for some mentoring, some spiritual mentoring on the card. And I got a call from a guy named Bill Keel, who doesn't live very far from here. And we had lunch one day, and we talked about kind of my faith and where I was and what I was doing and all that. And what he did was he recommended, and I've got the book here, that I buy and read William Barclay's study of the Gospel of Mark. And last week I didn't have this because I couldn't find it, and one of the people in the audience actually had it and brought it back to me the next day, so I thought that was kind of cool. But I started to read that every single day. It's broken up. You can almost do like a daily Bible study off of it. So I liked that so much, I bought another one of William Barclay's studies because he does the whole New Testament. And then Kathy bought me the entire thing for my birthday. And for a few years, that's what I did. That was my growth faith thing or whatever. I just sat for 15, 20 minutes a day and plowed through the entire New Testament reading William Barclay. I was going to say Charles Barkley. William Barclay. And for me, that's a good thing. That's how I learn, very quietly, sitting there going through things. And then when I look back, around in that same time frame, when it took 4 or 5, 6 years to read the entire New Testament 15 minutes a day. I mean, it takes a while. In the 2003 to 2005 time frame, a lot of things were happening in our life, Kathy and I's life. And I got a list, so I'm going to go through the list. Our daughter Erin had 2 spinal fusion surgeries. My father was diagnosed with dementia, and he passed away in March of 2004. Our son Andy was sick with something. It was later diagnosed as celiac disease, but he missed about 40% of his 5th grade year. And that's brutal when you're a parent. I had spinal fusion surgery, and when you get spinal fusion surgery as an adult, it's a lot worse than when you're a kid. I mean, the doctor said, well, you could do this when you're 70, but it could kill you. So I said, well, why don't we just do it now? But it was a big deal. There was a lot of professional stress. My mother had some back surgery. And my brother-in-law died just suddenly one Monday night. He was exercising and just died. And when you look at that, that's a lot of stuff in a 3-year period or whatever it was. And I was still doing my reading, and I was still doing my understanding. And I realize now that during that, I was starting to call on God to help me in those situations, which is something I never, ever would have done prior to, starting to this process. And I can remember 2 of them very specifically. One of them was Andy, our son, was sick. There was a period where they said, well, we got to check him for a brain tumor. And, a 10-year-old being checked for a brain tumor, it's nerve-wracking. And I took him over on a Saturday for an MRI, and he was in that tube, and he was so brave while he was doing this. And I cracked. I just said to myself, God, I can't do this anymore. I cannot support him today the way he's supposed to be supported. Could you give me some strength? And he did. I mean, immediately I felt the strength, and I could be a dad to Andy at that time. Another time, the nerve sticking out of the torso kicked in. I would get stressed at work at this time. I don't do this anymore, to the point of nausea if something wasn't going right. And one of the times this happened, everything worked out, because it always works out. I mean, it's work. It always works out. And I was ashamed of myself for being so, worked up. So as I'm walking back to my office with this relief coming over me, I had this image of God picking me up by the lapels and banging against the wall and saying, will you trust me now? Will you just trust me? So clearly, I think at this point my understanding is starting to grow. And I'm not starting to use God. God's becoming part of my life, I guess is the way to put it. I still had doubts. I still had the guy in the sky doubt and all that, and I was still wondering what it meant, but I was starting to come up some sort of curve, however you want to describe it. Then in 2004, I went to a Needles Eye Gala. I was invited, and again, I filled out the card. These cards are very powerful things. And this time, Buddy called me, and he asked me to join a small group. And something told me right away, just say yes. So I said yes. I was part of that group for about 4 years, and a few years ago, myself and Bill Cosby over here broke off of that group and started another one, another group, same time, same building, just a different group. And there's nothing like a small group to deepen your understanding. And I don't know if this is true in a woman's small group, but in a man's small group, what happens is you start to realize all that stuff you worry about and all that stuff that you think you're ashamed of, everyone else has the same thing, or something similar enough that it's okay. And we support each other and we work through it. Okay, so now this is the most embarrassing part of this talk. Go back to my personality traits, the goal setting, the lists, and all that. So I decided I was going to utilize my goal setting, business management skills, and I was going to jumpstart this whole faith process. I was going to just get God on the track here, and things were going to start moving forward. So the first thing I did, and I'm sorry, I did this. I decided I was going to go 40 days and not sin. And that was it. At the end of those 40 days, everything was going to be fine, Yeah, 2 hours. I don't know. 2 hours I became aware. Probably somewhere in the 2 hours I did it anyways. But so I scrapped that. So then I got this big yellow pad, and I decided I was going to list every sin I could remember from my entire life. And then I was going to go out in the driveway, and I was going to burn the list. And that was going to be me cleansing my soul type thing. They don't have enough ink for me to complete that. I just stopped that. I don't think I ever told you about this, did I? No. That's why we're still married. And then I said I was going to do 40 days of prayer, dedicated only to God revealing His will for my life, and that was it. He was just going to open the door, and the little light was going to come down between the clouds, and I was going to be all ready to go. Well, he greeted that with complete, absolute silence. I mean, nothing. So I'm percolating at this point. Well, then in 2008, I had, people say I had my big experience. And let me explain what happened. And I got to read through most of this because it's a pretty emotional time. But our daughter Erin, she was a senior in high school, was on a field trip in Stanton. And her and this guy out there, they were playing around. He picked her up, and he dropped her, and she hit her head in a curb. And blood, seizures, everything. Kathy called me about it. She said she had gotten a call from the teacher or whoever. And we talked about what we should do, and she said she would head out to Stanton, and we just thought she would get some stitches and come home, and that I would stay here, in case it dragged on and I could take care of the other kids and all that sort of thing. So Kathy's on her way out, and we start to learn that this is a lot more serious than we thought. And it turns out, the teacher called me, and it turns out that they were going to airlift her to MCV from Stanton, and that could I be over there when Erin arrived, which I love this woman, but that was the dumbest question a teacher's ever asked me in my life. Of course I'm going to be there when my daughter arrives. But she had bleeding on the brain. They put her in the neurological ICU. So she's up there, and you have to ask her questions every hour, and we want to make sure everything was okay. So we got to early evening, and Kathy went home just to make sure everything was kind of in line there. And my friend Scott Ziegler, who's actually here, came over to visit. And in the ICU, at 7 o'clock, they throw you out for an hour, hour and a half while they do the shift change, because the cases are so complicated, they don't want people hanging around. So we went down to the cafeteria, probably ate some Chick-fil-A or something. And as we were sitting there, a man walked up. And he was an African-American man about my height, wearing like green work clothes, like custodial uniform. And he walked up to me and he said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I was a little skeptical. I was like, "Sure." He says, "Is God good?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You have a child in here with a head injury." And I said, "Yeah. How'd you know that?" He said, "God is good," and he walked away. And Scott and I kind of looked at each other. I'm not sure if we talked, but clearly the tone at the table was, did that really happen? Then the guy comes back, and he says, "Can I ask you another question?" Now, at this point, I'm hooked. All right, I'm in. And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Your child has bleeding on the brain." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you read the Bible?" And I said, "Every day." And he said, "Psalm 91. He said, God wants you to read Psalm 91 each night before she goes to sleep." And then he started to leave, and as I walked away, he turned to me and he said, "Psalm 91, she's God's child." And when you hear a sentence and you kind of extrapolate a word at the end, I thought he was going to say she's God's child too, but he didn't. And there's two very distinct differences in those sentences, and I realized that this person that I had, this is the first time I realized this, I was just a steward. And I was a steward of Kathy and the family. And they're people on loan, from the big guy, so to speak. Scott had a Bible with him. So he read Psalm 91 to me. It's a psalm of protection. It's a beautiful psalm. And I, being who I am, overachieved. I read it twice a day while she was in the hospital. Then I read it every day for a year. I have it memorized. I say it at least 4 times a week now. I use it as a prayer. But earlier that week, let me talk about it. Earlier that week, I had asked God, "Can you help me not ask the basic 'are you there' question anymore?" Now, I do not think for a minute that God dropped my daughter on her head specifically so that I could learn a lesson. I think he does things so he can do 1,000 things at the same time, or 1,000,000 or whatever. But I did get this mental picture as I reflected on this thing of God sitting in some staff meeting up there. The prayer comes up and he says, I'm sick of this stuff with Rogers. Go drop his daughter in her head. I had this image. But what it accomplished for me, though, was that was it. The doubts were then gone forever. So I got over that hurdle of the gray beard in the sky thing. Shortly after this, we were faced with a new challenge, Kathy and I. And a member of our family living close by had serious substance abuse problems. We had 2 young nieces that she had, and we found ourselves always interceding, covering for what was happening. It was a really difficult time. And then there was a big event, and the 2 girls were actually taken from the mother and given to us legally. So we were responsible for these 2 girls, and the mom was off doing whatever. So over the course of a year, we dealt with courts, an angry mother, counseling, psychiatrists, lying, progress, setbacks, a mental strain that it's really hard to explain how hard the mental strain was, and the impact on our own family. Like we noticed our son Andy, that particular year, would be out of the house as much as humanly possible. He would be at a friend's house. Our daughter Lee, she struggled through it quite a bit. So it was another challenge that God put before us, and a lot of things came out of it. But I think 2 really good things came out of it on the faith side. I think our marriage, which was strong, really strong anyways, got stronger as a result of that. And I think you can go, you're not going to stay where you were. You're going to go one way or the other. And to me, marriage is a sacred thing, and I think that's part of my faith growth. And I learned to live one day at a time, because that's all we could do, was just take that day and get through it and do what we had to do, and then worry about the next one when it came. And if you're a nerve sticking out of a torso, that is a very, very important lesson. It's huge. So if I look back on all this, I see what God has done. He's gradually kind of brought me into the fold, so to speak. He's dealt with my slowness or lack of ability to understand what he's doing in my life. Then he brought me to the Word. He challenged me. He pounded me. He put us through, I think things happen. He put us through experiences so we could grow spiritually. He was patient when I didn't respond to clear messages, which I am forever grateful for. He kept working away. And what I tried to do was never stop trying. I call it staying in the room. I was obviously flawed. I was forever doubtful, but I stayed in the room, and because of that, God revealed himself to me. He did it slowly, and then I had, fortunately, a big dramatic moment where everything kind of fell into place for me. So then I start thinking about, what does God want me to do with my life? Now that what am I supposed to do? I'm always asking for guidance, although I'm not giving him a timetable anymore. He'll decide when he wants me to know. But I want to know what the next step is. I'd love to retire from the business world and go become do full-time ministry or become a priest or something like that. I'm always thinking I'm not doing enough, and I keep looking for that, the big gesture. What am I supposed to do? Build the orphanage, build the school, start a homeless shelter. What is it I'm supposed to do? And all that stuff may happen. And I don't think, looking back, God isn't very subtle, so I'll know when he wants me to do something. But what I've realized is we all have opportunities to minister all the time. And, I call it the churchy stuff. I have 2 small groups I'm involved with. I sing in the choir. I chair our missions and outreach committee at church. I'm on the Needles Eye board. We'll cook meals for Caritas. We share our financial resources. We do all the checklist stuff, which I think is important. But what I've realized, and what I try to practice, is that every moment I spend as a husband, a father, a son, a brother, a boss, an employee, a friend, it's all service in God's name. Every single thing we do. And sometimes it's huge, like taking in 2 nieces. Sometimes it's routine, like making sure you're home for dinner with the family. And sometimes you might have to sacrifice something that would help your career to do that, but it's routine. It's often inconvenient, comforting a friend at a tough time of the day or whatever. mentoring someone who asks for help, making sure you go to funerals, whatever it is, there's always something. I always have to control my worry and my anger because I'm a very passionate person. To me, that's ministry. As a boss, I try to be a servant leader. I realize my job is helping my folks do their job. All this is stuff that changed because of these experiences I had. But whatever it is, everything I do all day, every day is ministry. And that's the most important thing I've taken from this long trip that God has brought me on. And more importantly than that, I think, it's never thinking you're done. I always cringe at the term mature Christian. I just don't think there is such a thing. I think there was one, and I don't think he would say he was a Christian. Because I don't think the Christian movement started when he was here. And Kathy doesn't want me to say this, but I'm a mess. All right? I'm a whack job. I fret, I worry, I'm jealous, I'm petty. Sometimes I'm mean. I'm often self-centered. I mean, the list, there's not enough time for me to talk about the things I put on the list, but I'm going to keep trying to get better every day and try to pound stuff out and get rid of it. So where I would leave you with is very simple. If you're wondering what all this God stuff is about, because I spent, whatever it was, 35 years wondering what this God stuff was about, just take a step. Talk to someone, say a short prayer. Jesus, help me. Say 3 words. Open a book, open the Bible, get a Barclay book, get any book you can find. And once you make that step, you'll be in the room, and God will take care of the rest. I've talked to so many people where that's the case. And I think what I've been through indicates that. I'm not unique in any way with all this. So that's really what I wanted to say. And I just want to say thank you for coming today. It's kind of humbling to see this many people here. And if you have any questions or whatever, I'll be in the back at the end. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Steve. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I do want to ask a question. We have probably, 80 or 90 people here today. Anybody here wondering, seriously wondering, not necessarily all the time, but seriously wondering about what all this God stuff's about? Anybody? Statistically, I would say there are probably a few here. I'd be surprised if perhaps there aren't more than a few. But Steve ended with that note because for a long time in his life, that was a major question. And I don't think his life is unusual. And certainly there was a time in my life when I was wondering the same thing. So for those of you who are wondering and who maybe have, as he said, been trying to stay in the room with this issue, but you don't really know what it's all about and you want to, I want to ask you to be open-minded, to stay with us here for just another moment or two. I'd like to have a prayer to close. And after the prayer, I want to come back and call your attention to the card and give a couple of opportunities, one particularly, where you can really take opportunity to find out what this God thing's all about for you. Would you bow with me for a closing prayer? Father, thank you so much for Steve Rogers, for his love for you, and particularly, Lord, today, for his transparency and availability to you. I thank you that you have touched and redeemed his life, that you have given him a glimpse of the reality of what call really is, that he is yours wherever he may be. And that is the same, Lord, for all of us who know you. And I pray particularly now, Father, for those here who really are wondering what this God thing really is all about. Not just giving an intellectual exercise to it, but really having a heart's desire to know for themselves what it's about. And for those particularly, Lord, now my prayer would be that your Spirit would touch them in such a way that they really would be open to you, for you to help them understand it for themselves. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for this time. And I pray it in Christ's name. Amen.